to introduce our public safety panel. First, Kevin Altucker is going to be moderating for us. Kevin has an array of experience working in and around the public safety system, hopefully not experiencing it himself, but we'll see. And Kevin is going to help us with moderating this panel. We have Sheriff Harold from Lane County, thank you. Chief Mike Caven from the Eugene Springfield Fire, Adam from Cahoots, and Chief Skinner from Eugene Springfield, or excuse me, from the Eugene Police Department. I'm not adding that to your resume. Thanks.
Thank you, Brittany, and thanks everyone for being here this morning. Glad to moderate this important conversation. Public safety is really an integral part of how we respond to crises in our community, and sometimes we forget about that, and so we're very honored to have these four folks with us today. They share a breadth of experiences that they are going to share with us. So my goal is, in the next 45 minutes, is to ask these folks some prepared questions, and they're fairly open-ended, and we'll see where they go. And I'd also like to leave time for questions from the audience. And so I will try to run the microphone out to an audience member so that we can all hear the question. That's my plan. We'll see how it works. Welcome. Thanks for being here. I'm going to start with you, Chief Skinner, with a question regarding the Community Safety Initiative, which was passed a few years ago. The payroll tax is being collected. And so the question is, have those additional funds made a difference in our public safety system? What challenges have you faced in making a more measurable difference on crime in the community? And finally, this is a three-part question, so you following? Okay. And do you anticipate making more progress soon to help voters see the value of that funding?
Is this one turned on? There we go. Thanks, Kevin, for that question, and it's a great question. I'm sure you didn't write it, so that's how I know it's a great question. I know we call it the Community Safety Initiative, but let's not make any bones about this. This is a payroll tax, of which most of us in this room pay for. So let's just call it what it is. It's a community safety payroll tax to try to do something different in our system. And that has been collected for the last couple of years. We've been collecting the payroll tax to try and provide resources to our system that have been long overdue and needed in this community. And so I think there's a few different examples, and I'm trying to not get ahead of council here, because on October 9th they're going to hear this same speech, but we have some things in our community now that are directly related to your tax dollars. Some of the early things that we really tried to do with that payroll tax is to stand up a street crimes unit to be able to answer some of the acute problems we have in neighborhoods and around town. We hear all the time the great stories about street crimes and what they're doing, whether it's taken 11,000 fentanyl pills off the street or shutting down a problem drug house in the community. I can't count how many times we have people on their front porches applauding the work of the Eugene Police Department in street crimes. And that doesn't exist without the Community Safety Payroll Tax. It just doesn't. Our CSO program doesn't exist without the Community Safety Payroll Tax. And CSOs are an alternative response so that we can try and free officers up for what officers should be doing, which is responding to serious in-progress life safety and property calls for service, and allow our CSOs to do the other kind of lower level calls, often thought of as being crimes, societal crimes or quality of life types of crimes that are happening. One of the biggest crimes that happens in this community, if we could make a meaningful difference on, would be around the simple thefts that are occurring, our shoplifts that are occurring in our stores, our car prowls, our low-level burglaries, and then our trespass calls. Those are the big buckets of calls that we would want to address. And in many cases, the CSOs are making a really large impact in that particular area. And we love the idea of an alternative response to those things. Most recently, our community safety payroll tax is supporting what we're doing downtown. And if downtown looks and feels a little bit better than it has for a while, then that's good. I'm not resting on those laurels. If we're having that same conversation in a year from now, then I'll feel pretty good about that. But we can do anything meaningful in a short period of time. We have to be able to sustain it. But the downtown and the approach that we're having to downtown around safety and cleanliness is directly attributed to the community safety payroll tax. Having an incident commander downtown that is looking at things differently, that has the ability to access resources to be more responsive to the needs of our downtown businesses and our visitors downtown. We're working on activating downtown with positive behavior so that we can dilute some of the bad behavior, and we're holding people accountable downtown in a different way. Complementary to that, we're really excited about a partnership with Lane County Behavioral Health that is dangerously close to being landed, where for the first time ever, we're going to have a co-response model for behavioral health crisis in the downtown. Now, this is not just to supplant what Cahoots does in our community, but we've recognized some acute behavioral health situations in the downtown core that need to be case managed. We have 10, 12, 15 individuals that constantly we deal with downtown that we need to get on a pathway to wellness and stabilized. And if we do that, then we're going to be safer in the downtown. That's community safety payroll tax dollars that's going to help us do that. So there's a variety of those things, and there's a lot of other things that I could talk about, but there's a variety of those things. The number one barrier we've had to making a meaningful difference is because when you have a system set up that's designed to make a difference on the backs of human beings, is you have to be able to hire the human beings to do the work. All of us feel that pain when you think about if you're in the service area. All of us feel that pain. The ability to have the human beings, the right human beings to do the work is important. And right now, post-2020, we are struggling to hire the right people and the numbers of people that we need. Currently, we're down about 40 positions department-wide. 25 of those are your police officers. We continue to be the fastest hiring process of any that I know of, and yet we continue to hire 6 and 7 at a time. And in 2019, I was hiring 15 and 16 at a time. But we're hiring 6 and 7 at a time, and we're big enough that we're having 3 or 4 of those of people starting to retire. They're reaching that age where they're stepping away. So we're making, the onesie, twosie additions, and that's really, really tough to get to where we need to be. So, but if you're in a service industry that needs people to serve people, then that's one of the biggest challenges we have, and we'll just keep continuing to push. So let me stop there because I could probably talk for another 30 minutes on this, and I'm sure you have a question, a really good question for somebody else.
Thank you, Chief Skinner. Next question is for Sheriff Harold. How has the growing mental health and substance abuse crisis impacted our criminal justice system? We've heard we have a shortage of jail space and other resources in our community. How should we address this, and what should we be doing differently?
That's a big question that we've been here this morning talking about, right? We've heard lots of folks talk about it. There's no one simple answer to that question, obviously. Clearly, the mental health crisis in our community is a big impact, and those folks of you, that are here this morning and seeing that on a regular basis, the solution to that is going to be multifaceted. One thing that jumped out at me with the last panel that was up here was a couple of service providers used the word accountability. And that just has to be part of the mix. There has to be some accountability as part of the mix to make things successful. One of the things that I would suggest and am frankly hopeful for is that you all are here this morning, part of your chamber, interested in seeing a more successful, better community. And I'm seeing that in other parts of the state as well. And I love having these local conversations. We've got all these folks in this room, local community leaders invested in their local community. I love having conversations with my local partners, and we do that frequently. We have a local public safety coordinating council, et cetera. We do a lot of good work locally, and we stretch your tax dollars pretty well locally because we've got a legacy of needing to do that. And what I want to ask you all to do is to recognize also that there has to be engagement at a statewide level for the local folks to be successful. Like I said, we've been innovative. We've tried new things. Certainly in the Lane County Jail, we've been innovative. But folks, I would love for you to invest some of your energy and make connections and relationships with your state legislators. I'm just going to give you 2 quick examples that I think We need to make sure that your state legislators even know that this is happening. As an example, and I'm trying not to make this too long, but in the 90s, the state struck a deal with counties and said, hey, counties, why don't you take over parole and probation? And why don't you take over holding incarcerated felons for a year or more, but we'll pay for it. And the state said, in fact, as part of this, you do a cost study every 2 years and give us that information, and we'll pay for these services, but we think you can do it better, counties. Well, here's the problem. They're not actually funding it. They're defunding it. To the tune of a difference in Lane County of $9.5 million in the 23-25 biennium. That's a difference of 15 parole and probation officers that are, among these other service providers that were up here, these parole and probation officers are walking alongside folks, trying to help them get back integrated, trying to help them get back into being successful in life, trying to get them to be contributors to society. If we go from 40, which is about what we have in our county now, down to 25, is that beneficial to us? Do we feel like we're in a place where we could probably do without 15 parole and probation officers? I don't feel that way. The state system for funding this is broken. It hasn't been touched since 1994. They haven't acknowledged the true cost of providing the services in 20 years. And that really has to be addressed at a state level for us to be successful locally. And then just another quick example, it's much smaller, but the citizens of the state passed a measure called 73, Measure 73, and this was more like in 2010-ish. And there was a number of things involved in that measure. One of them was that anybody that had their third DUI conviction was supposed to spend 90 days in the county jail. As part of the measure that the whole state voted yes on, was that the state would fund those 90 days in the county jail. It's in the measure that everybody voted for. So we send a quarterly invoice to the state based on how many folks were in our jail serving their 90-day sentence under this measure. And my final quarter of last year, we sent the invoice to the state, and the state said, oh, there's no money left for that. So it was a $100,000 bill that the state just said, oh, there's no more funding left in that program. There's a state measure that says the state's supposed to pay for it, but then they just say, there's no money, we're not paying for it. So I'm sorry if I'm sounding a little bold and a little upset. I don't mean to, but honestly, we have to get some statewide engagement. Did I answer the question, or did I just say what I wanted to say?
No, I think you answered the question, and you incited the crowd. Thank you. I do have a question, though. Approximately at any one time in Lane County, how many individuals are under active supervision? Oh, he's looking to Greg Rickoff.
I'm going to phone a friend.
So the answer is right now we're about 2,100 individuals, and normally we're around 3,000 individuals under active supervision. Thank you. All right, the next question is for Adam, who's from Cahoots. How has Cahoots and Whitebird's operations evolved over the past few years to meet the growing needs of our community?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In 1989, Cahoots was born, so Cahoots will be 34, I guess now. We'll be 35 next year. And in the beginning, it was a partnership between Whitebird. Cahoots is one of the 10 wings of Whitebird, as you may be aware. And it was a partnership directly between Whitebird and the city of Eugene. And it evolved over time, not just in the past few years, but in the last 35 years, to include the city of Springfield and also some contract with Lane County. There's money that comes from Trillium. We have grants, things that didn't exist at the beginning. And for a long time, until just about 5 or 6 years ago, the organization operated on a 12-hour shift. And we are now a 24-hour organization in both Eugene and Springfield. And when we can, we are about 36 hours in Eugene. So we'll have 1.5 vans at a time. And in the last few years, especially in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, we received quite a bit of national attention for our model. Not every day, but certainly every week, we have organizations and cities from around the country who reach out to us and are looking for guidance on creating a similar response model. We like to think of ourselves as the third branch of public safety, so that we have police, we have fire and EMS, and we have mobile integrated health crisis response. And so what this looks like for us as an organization is that we have a van that has been retrofit to have capacity to transport people, as well as to provide basic medical attention and crisis intervention services in the field. And we're really proud of the work that we do. Now, in the last few years, and especially with that national attention, the organization structurally is not prepared for that kind of attention. That happened overnight for us. For years, we had been in the community, in the field, doing the work, and all of a sudden, we're getting a lot of attention, and people are like, hey, how do you do this? And we're like, what are you talking about? We just go out and we do it. And they're like, well, what's your data? What are your metrics? We're like, we just go out in the field and we respond to people. What are you talking about? And so it's new for someone like me to be in the organization. For years, the administrative side of the organization was managed by folks who are working on the van. And van workers first, either medics or crisis workers or both. Many people are cross-trained. And then extra to that work inside of the hours per week, people would take on responsibilities inside of the organization. We are a collective model. We do things voluntarily. We don't make anybody do anything that they don't want to do. And so even inside our collective decision-making model as an organization, it works the same way. And for years, that's how it worked. And so now I'm here and I have this title of development and external relations, and I'm not the first person to have this position, but it's new within the last year or so. And we are looking to shift and change and grow and mature along with our partners, because things are different than they were 34 years ago, and different even than 2 or 3 years ago. So long answer, plenty more to say, but that's what I got.
Well, I appreciate your candor, Adam, and just heads up for all of you, I'm going to ask you a question later on to think about, well, what can the business community do to support your particular area of operations? So be thinking about that. You know, I appreciate your comments about overnight, you know, you had this intense national laser beam spotlight on your operations. It must have been interesting. I hope someone is writing a book about that. All right, our next question goes to Eugene Springfield Fire Chief Mike Caven. How has the fire department had to change or innovate your systems of operations to address the growing demand for emergency services? And the second part of that question is, what areas do you all need support to do your jobs better?
Thanks for the question. It's a great one. You know, I'd first start just to ground everybody in, you know, who we are as Eugene Springfield Fire. We're a shared service between the cities of Eugene and Springfield. We present ourselves operationally and functionally as one unit, yet we still report to both cities, both city councils, 2 budgets. And so it's a unique opportunity as we grow in a system where we like to joke in the 911 center, when in doubt, send fire out. We're kind of the problem solvers, and emergency services has been our single biggest area of growth over the last 40 years, almost exponentially. We've done it kind of the same way since when the private ambulance evacuated the Eugene Springfield area in 1981, and we took over the ambulance system. We saw a lot of growth, but we utilized cross-trained firefighters to continue to meet that demand. And as we've seen it grow in recent years, we realized that we needed to take a different approach, not only for availability of workforce, but the total cost of having staff that are trained to do two highly skilled jobs in a critical environment, and say, where are we matching those people, the people that want to do the work, and a workforce in waiting to the problem. And so just this last year, we reclassified some of our firefighter positions to single role, standalone EMS positions. And in doing that, leveraging the cost savings from that program to add resource hours, add to a basic life support program that we started in 2016 to meet the type of call with the type of resource that best fits. Sorry. Oh, then it got real loud. But so we saw the success of that. We implemented a single role advanced life support program, expanded those hours, and are really getting what we should probably call medical services, not just emergency medical services, secure in its own division, where it's future ready, has a solid foundation to take advantage of grant opportunities. The recent the CSI and the recent budget, we added an alternative response planning chief who will be interviewing here in a couple hours, or a group of candidates for that will really help us take it to the next level. Fast forward to the comment I made of when in doubt, send fire out. We're all acutely aware of the impending closure of the University District Emergency Room. And that leaves Eugene Springfield Fire as the state's largest public ambulance transport provider in a space with Lane County Public Health, with Lane Transit District, as the community's safety net for these medical issues. And really fast forwarding the thinking of the type of resources that we're putting on the streets, how we're presenting ourselves in that space, and doing it in a way to capture as much of the problem as possible without overburdening the emergency room system. And so again, it's those things that come out of nowhere that cause some of the greatest innovations. And so the work that we've done to reimagine what the future of emergency or medical services are in our field have us prepared to help with our partners to mitigate that problem. As far as the second question of the business community, one of the best things that the community did, and I think this body, was help support the payroll tax, the community safety tax, to allow us to leverage through our quality control, some unspent dollars to buy some ambulances to help us expand that program. It's that level of support and recognizing we have some constraints within the tax system to fund critical emergency services, and there needed to be new and creative ways to address that. That program, that type of support, that engagement helps us get there.
Chief Caven, thank you. So I'm hearing a lot of thank yous from public service providers for the payroll tax. So that's a message I'm hearing. Let's talk drugs, shall we? Measure 110 was passed with the best intentions of making things better in the state of Oregon, and I think it's fair to say there's broad agreement that probably hasn't worked out as intended. So I'm interested to hear from each of you your thoughts about Measure 110. How has it affected your particular operations, and what do you think maybe some changes might be needed going forward? I'll start with Chief Skinner.
We are up to our neck in this conversation right now statewide. Tomorrow and Thursday all day, I'll be up in Salem at a joint OACP, which is Oregon Association of Chiefs of Police, and OSSA, Oregon State Sheriff's Association. So I think Cliff and I will both be there together, and this will be a big part of our dialogue. There is a draft bill that's out, a 40-page draft bill that's out that is gathering signatures now for a ballot measure in November of '24 that completely reforms ballot measure 110. And there's a lot of things about ballot measure 110 that are wrong, and there's a lot of things about ballot measure 110 that we need to keep in place if we're going to make any difference. One of those things that ballot measure 110 is what we need to do around the shift to ballot measure 110 is get away from individual harm reduction as being the only strategy when it comes to this situation. Because if we don't have a balance between individual harm reduction and community harm reduction, then we're never going to make any progress in this space. And part of community harm reduction is that we have on-demand treatment for people. You heard from Eve Gray where we rank as a state and investment in a lot of these services. And if we don't have on-demand treatment for people that are suffering from a substance addiction, then it's not going to matter how many arrests we make or how much jail beds we have. We're going to be in the same space, but we have to have on-demand treatment. And what Ballot Measure 110 does is it carves some money out that we need to preserve that's going to be able to do those things. The problem is what we found through Ballot Measure 110 is that people that are in the throes and the grips of addiction or withdrawals are not going to make personal choices to get themselves into services. So we have to have a forced treatment option if we're going to make a difference in this space. And so that's what needs to be fixed about Ballot Measure 110. And whether you like it or not, oftentimes we hear the success stories of people that were initially incarcerated, that were forced to get clean, and then sent on to addiction services that come back to us time and time again and say, thank you, because it changed my life. Because quite honestly, under the existence of Ballot Measure 110 right now, I don't know how many, I'm not sure I can point to one instance where an enforcement action under the premise of Ballot Measure 110, which, if you remember, made it an e-violation to be in possession of dangerous drugs, which, oh, by the way, is lower than a stop sign violation, which was supposed to incentivize somebody to get treatment to avoid the $100 citation. We've not seen any success in that pathway, in that life cycle of people getting help. And so we have to do something differently. That something differently, in my opinion, is to create a forced treatment option through the criminal justice system and revert back to some of the things that were in place prior to the Ballot Measure 110 being approved. So it's a complex conversation. Part of Ballot Measure 110, there's some things we get to keep. There's some things we need to invest in. We need to make sure that in that system, anytime we do something different to the system, we look at the system as a whole. It's not about arresting a ton of people and hoping you have treatment options, because you're not going to be able to do anything if you don't have the prosecutors and the courts to be able to do that. We need to make sure that we have money going to the prosecution of these and the courts. We need to make sure that we are funding our alternative courts like drug court, mental health court, and we need to have on-demand treatment. So that's the financial mechanism about Measure 110. The mechanics of 110 need to be revamped back to where we were so that we have actually some forced treatment options.
Thank you, Chief Skinner. Quick time check. Brittany, how are we looking? 15 minutes, thank you. All right, Adam, if you could comment on how 110 has affected your neck of the woods.
Sure. Inside of Whitebird as an organization, we do receive some of the Measure 110 funding to provide substance abuse treatment. So I can say that that is a thing that does happen. Also, as the chief mentioned, the measure that was presented to voters, in my opinion, was far from perfect. I was actually working at the Capitol in Salem the year that 110 was passed. I was working for a state representative as a legislative director. And it was my preference at the time that that ballot measure not actually be passed, and that we would have let, for better or worse, the legislature actually handle and tackle that issue. I thought that it would have allowed for more nuance in the decision-making, in the crafting of the programs and the options for treatment, the options for what penalties would or would not exist, all of these sorts of things. It's one of the difficulties that comes with the initiative and referendum system structurally, in my opinion, in the state of Oregon, that it takes a small number of people to put a question on the ballot, and when the question is on the ballot, it is a very strict question. It's either up or down, and then you get what you get. You don't get the committee process, you don't get multiple discussions, you don't get to have conversations in the same way that you do through a legislative or a democratic process. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Chief Caven, 110, what are your thoughts?
For us, it's been a challenge, right? We see an influx of folks seemingly here because our rules are a little more relaxed than other states, and so for some of our more transient population that we service in the downtown and the core areas, that's been an experience. And then just watching the overall health decline of our community members that we see frequently in those spaces. Each time that our crews will go out, they're in a little worse shape, and we don't have a lot of options. The community now has access to Narcan to help prevent these deaths, but oftentimes what it seems to be is a more slow, painful death because we don't have the options that exist to a stabilization center and these places to take them. The hospitals are overburdened with the problem. We're overburdened with the problem. We need a solution that funds real help for people.
Thank you. And finally, Sheriff Harold, how has 110 affected your operations?
Yeah, I'll say first that I agree with everything that's already been shared by the others, and just a little reflection on some personal experience. So I grew up in our office. I worked in our jail when I was a 21-year-old kid. I started as an explorer when I was 16. I didn't get invited into the drug culture much when I was in high school because everybody knew that I was riding around with deputies every moment I had off. So I remember working in the jail, and it might surprise you to know that our folks that work in the jail, we get to know some of the folks that come. I mean, much like the navigators at the mission get to know people, we get to know people. And I can't tell you how many times after someone had been in our custody for a period of time where they had been able to, clean up a little bit and think straight, and they would say, Harold, you're never going to see me in here again. I'm done. I'm not going back to using methamphetamine. I'm done with living this life. And I 100% know that they meant it. I mean, they didn't want to be stealing from their grandma so that they could buy their next drugs. And so I know when they exited our facility, they 100%, they were ready to turn over a new leaf. Unfortunately, oftentimes when they left our facility, they went back to wherever they stored their clothes, and it's probably surrounded by bad influences, and so oftentimes they struggled. But at least they had that moment of clarity to say, I don't want this anymore. If we're contacting them on the street and writing them a citation that's, again, it's lower than a safety belt citation, is that giving them that moment to consider a different path? I don't think it is. And I just can tell you that personally I've talked to so many who have come up to me and thanked me. There's an individual that's a service provider in our community now. He's part of a MAP program. And he came up and he said, I've been in your jail 42 times earlier in my life. If it wasn't for the way you and your staff treated me every time, I wouldn't have finally gotten my life right. And I've heard that a number of times. Then the other thing is that in our organization, when you transfer from the jail to patrol, you go into court transport, where you're taking folks from jail into a courtroom for their court processes and taking them back. Lane County has had a drug treatment court for forever. A really great one. We were a pioneer in that. And I tell you folks, the graduations for drug treatment court are open affairs, and if you haven't ever been to one, you should go. They are so fantastic to watch families reunited. And you just know these are moms, these are folks that thought they lost their kid, and the celebration after a 2-year process, and drug treatment court is not easy. I mean, folks oftentimes say, I don't want treatment court, just send me to prison, because they have to walk this path, and they struggle. But the team in drug treatment court is there for when they do trip up to bring them back onto the right path. And so 2 years down the road, they get to reunite with the family. Families bring posters, and it's just a really cool event. Those are the wins that we get to celebrate, and I don't think that we're getting enough of those now that 110 passed. And while pre-110, were we winning the war on drugs? No. Were we rescuing some people from that loss? Yes. So it definitely needs to be tweaked. We need to get, as the chief said, we need a mechanism to get people into treatment. They will thank us for it later because they have.
Impactful words, Sheriff. Thank you. All right, we have 5 quick minutes left. I want at least a couple short questions from the audience. So this is audience participation time. Raise your hand. I'll run the microphone over to you. And you can ask the panelists a question.
Where can you sign the petition?
Where do we sign the petition for?
I have no idea. Yeah,
To change Measure 110, okay.
I don't know. I'll get that information and I'll have it pushed out. I'll probably get a ton of information about this over the next couple of days. So.
All right, thank you. And one more quick question.
So I've been blessed with the opportunity to do ride-alongs with Cahoots 3 specific times, and it changed my life. Like, I will never be the same. But just for a greater understanding, can you talk a little bit about how Cahoots is dispatched, where they're dispatched to, and the integration between fire and police?
Great question, and you get to answer it in about 40 seconds.
Yeah, Cahoots is dispatched out of Central Lane Dispatch. So if you call 911, Cahoots can be an option for your call. If you call 988, that will also be centralized. So depending on what the call is, dispatch will help determine if it's police, fire, Cahoots, or some combination of the two of them. So, or three of them. So we operate inside the city of Eugene and the city of Springfield inside of the urban growth boundary.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, as promised, I want to give each of our panelists an opportunity to express how they believe the business community can help their operations. We'll start with the sheriff.
All right. Well, I also want to start off by saying thanks. Your group helped this community pass the jail levy back in last May. 79% voted yes. So this organization, the business group, helped with that, and you continue to help engage at a local level. So thank you for that. Thank you for your interest. And again, my request to you is call your state legislator and make sure that they really understand how the state's interaction with your local government and the ways that we need the state to engage. So 100% has to do with, and this is just one guy's opinion, the state's taken in more tax revenue than I've ever seen them take in before. They should be funding public safety as they're supposed to. And then we need big time help from the state when it comes to our mental health crisis also. There's a group meeting at a statewide level about the ability to force treatment for folks to get them into a place again where they can think more clearly and make choices on future treatment. And that's going to require some statutory change in our state. When we looked at the Stabilization Center, we went and looked at this fantastic model down in Tucson, Arizona, all the great things it's doing. We can't do them here because our statutes are different. And so there needs to be some changes. And I think statewide, everybody recognizes that. It's just zeroing in on what exactly that looks like. So if you could encourage your legislators in those two areas, we really need the state's help for us to be successful locally.
Thank you, Sheriff. Chief Caven, 30 seconds. How can the business community help?
Seconds. Yeah, no, it's events like this. It's asking questions. You're all taking the time to do this. Many of you sit on boards and commissions throughout our communities. Share your wisdom, and then continue growing our business community, our economy, to help us get critical funding for these issues. So that we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Chief. And Adam, how can the business community help Cahoots?
One of our greatest struggles is to maintain stable funding. Despite our national recognition and recognition in the community, the funding situation that we face, we run a very thin margin. We have about 35 employees. We run right now on about $2 million a year. And not necessarily every year, but it feels like every year there's a question of internally, are we even going to be able to keep doing this? And everyone from the outside says, Cahoots, we love you. Oh, Cahoots, you're great. And on the inside, we're going, okay, we need, how do we keep doing this? And so what I would like to see from my development role is the creation of a foundation endowment to secure the funding for the service. So if you can help with that, that'd be great.
Thank you very much. And finally, Chief Skinner, how can the business community help?
I'm going to take more than 30 seconds, though I'm warning you. And we're in the city of Eugene, and I'm the chief, so I get to do that. We'd like to see Cahoots get an endowment too. We really support that notion that it should not be on the backs of government to fully fund this. What I would ask all of you to do as community members and stakeholders in this community is to educate yourselves. Educate yourself on what enforcement actually means in this community, because enforcement doesn't always look and feel like what you think enforcement is. There's a system that we have to play by these rules, and so it's really important for you to understand the interconnectedness of what police action looks like and what the outcomes are and what that means to our system. I hear from people all the time, so many and so oftentimes, well, if you just come and arrest these people, this would fix the problem. The answer to that is no. It's not going to fix that problem. There's instances where the arrest is very, very appropriate, and we're willing to go through that process, but there's so many instances where that is the quick fix in so many people's minds, but it really, really impacts the greater sense of the system that they need to understand. So educate yourselves on what the system is and what we can and we can't do. By rule of law, what we can and we can't do in certain circumstances is really, really important. The other thing I would tell you is to work your way out of this notion that somehow this city council and this city leadership is tying my hands from doing my job. That's absolutely erroneous. And I get really, really aggravated, if you can't tell, when people push the easy button and try to point to our local politicians and our local leaders as being the problem with a system that we largely inherited and that we're trying to slowly work our way out of. We're in this position after decades and decades and decades of decisions. We're not going to emerge out of this in a year or two. We have to slowly back our way out of this. And so every time we point to this council as being a barrier for us doing our job, or city leadership as a barrier for doing its job, it doesn't do anything to motivate me to do anything different. So understand that that's not a barrier for me. This city council and the policies that they're contemplating now have been more supportive than any time I've been a chief, and I've been a chief in 2 different states for 13 years. This city leadership is as supportive of this police department and this public safety system as any city leadership I've ever been a part of, and I've been a chief for 13 years in 2 different states. So please, let's change the way we're approaching this. Understand the system, understand the public safety system, what enforcement looks like, and then we keep using this vernacular in this community. Keep pushing. How many times have you heard that? We'll keep pushing on our end too, but we'll keep pushing legally, morally, and ethically. And that's my commitment.
Thank you very much. And yeah, let's keep that applause going for our public safety panelists. Thank you very much.